News from the Middle East. Israel unleashed a new round of airstrikes on Gaza early Saturday. 80 people were killed and about 50 others were wounded in the attack, per the Palestinian authorities. This is one of the deadliest attacks of the 10-month Israel-Hamas war.
The latest shelling comes as U.S., Qatari, and Egyptian mediators renewed their push for Israel and Hamas to achieve a ceasefire agreement. Also, new reports and videos have surfaced of an ongoing torture of Palestinian prisoners at the hand of the IDF. Here to dive into all of this is The Hill's White House columnist, Niall Stanage. Thanks for coming on, Niall.
Good to be with you.
So let's start with this attack on the school. This came as President Biden has authorized $3.5 billion worth of munitions to Israel. What do you make of that decision and the events over the weekend?
So to that direct point, Jessica, it would appear from footage of the aftermath of this strike and from munitions experts, some of them American, that these were American bombs used in this strike. The death toll you mentioned in the introduction is, I think, upwards of 80 now. CNN reporting at least 93. So it is clearly something that is, the White House will seek to defend it. It will come in for a lot of criticism for that defense, I imagine.
Yeah, that's what we're wondering about. Obviously, the attitude, the stance of the Biden-Harris administration toward the Israeli government has been something that has put Biden at odds with many of the progressive base. We're now in this transition period where Biden remains the president, but Kamala Harris's policies, whatever they might be with respect to the Middle East, are going to be of interest. In the past, we've done this whole White House not really thrilled with Netanyahu or his policies, but not going to actually get in the way of them. Is there any indication that is changing?
I don't think that there is any great suggestion that that is changing in a concrete way, Robbie. It is true that Vice President Harris has sounded a notch or two more sympathetic to the Palestinians and to the suffering of the Palestinians. And in the wake of the strike that we're talking about, she reiterated that the administration's position is that too many civilians have been killed. Well, that's all very well, but the question then arises, so what are you going to do about it? And the only thing that the administration has ever done throughout this now 10-month conflict is pause one arms shipment. Is Vice President Harris, if she were elected to the top job, going to change that? I guess she might, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of money on it as yet.
When Matt Miller was asked about this in the press briefing by Ryan Grimm, specifically what's colloquially known as the Rape and Torture Center, that's what Grimm called it when he asked what was going on there. What does the U.S. make of this? Miller said, we're investigating this. We're waiting on an investigation. The fact that Matt Miller knew what the Rape and Torture Center was, there's been a lot of videos on social media that are just horrible to watch. What do you think this means for the United States, who has the conventional arms transfer policy, which says they will not give munitions to human rights violators? Do you expect an investigation to happen in the first place, let alone anything to come of this?
Not from the United States. Sadly, the administration's default position is that it is up to Israel to investigate these matters. Now, I personally don't see how that is a plausible moral or political position, given the number of times where we have seen Israel and the Israeli government getting caught in lies. The killing of Hind Rajab, the young Palestinian girl, for example, there was a completely false set of events put forth by the authorities in Israel. The IDF had previously, and I believe continues to, deny there has been any torture in detention facilities. Now, we have a video, one of which you're alluding to, which appears to show a Palestinian detainee being raped. So how you can then fall back on the position that we're waiting for Israel to investigate and expect the American public or the global public to believe you or to think that that is a credible position is mystifying to me.
The state of the ceasefire negotiations is that Hamas recently said they would not take part in the latest round of negotiations, citing various airstrikes and also the targeted assassination of Hamas leaders. If they do not participate in these talks, Israel has signaled, well, then we will just continue with exactly what's been going on. What do you make of the state of potential ceasefire negotiations?
I've always been skeptical, Robbie, about those ceasefire negotiations for a whole lot of reasons. One being that it seems to me the United States administration has kept insisting for a long time that the original ceasefire proposal was an Israeli proposal. To put it charitably, very charitably, the evidence that that's the case is mixed, because the original proposal put forth by President Biden suggested that there would be eventually a total cessation of hostilities in Gaza, and did not appear to make that conditional upon the elimination or destruction of Hamas. It is not remotely clear that that is Benjamin Netanyahu's position. Now, you can then get into the whole broader debate about, does either side really want a ceasefire? Does the Israeli government and Mr. Netanyahu in particular have a vested interest in continuing the conflict for reasons of domestic politics? Does Hamas believe that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated through this conflict? All of those are valid questions. All that I'm saying is I'm skeptical, and have been for a long time, of this purported ceasefire plan.
The Egyptian and Qatari mediators of the ceasefire talks and negotiations seem to indicate that Hamas leaders absolutely want a ceasefire. They're at the table, they want a deal, but actually Bibi Netanyahu's position is more unclear. This is according to CNN reporting. What do you make of his position as the United States' strongest ally? Can the United States force him to agree to a ceasefire deal? Do you think that's possible in the future, or do you think it's really the case that his position's unknown because at the end of the day, he does not want a ceasefire?
I think the United States government could absolutely put more pressure on him and could use much more leverage than it has been willing to do. I do think, Jessica, that the American media broadly has failed, and I would actually exempt Rising from this, but the American media broadly has failed in talking about just how hardline the current government of Israel is. These debates often get cast in a very broad light. Does one stand with Israel or not stand with Israel, etc. This is by any stretch the most right-wing government in the history of the State of Israel. It has at least two people, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who are extremists by any reasonable yardstick. And those people are, to Netanyahu's right, putting pressure upon him, even as he is also under pressure from Israelis, including some hostage families, to do a deal. So the domestic situation in Israel does play a big part in this. Mr. Netanyahu has always been, in my judgment, a rather ruthless and pretty cynical figure. And so I think to expect him to sort of go for a ceasefire for the greater good is an overly optimistic hope.
Niall, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.